that I really do enjoy coming to this synod. Because each time I come here, I'm enriched, so enriched. Bishop Silis was making some reference yesterday, talking about how this is what it must be like in the kingdom of God, kingdom of heaven. The diversity, the richness of the discourse here, the commitment that is so palpable. And one of the most profound things I'll be taking away, I mean, Bishop's charge is always a masterpiece that is masterfully delivered. We've become used to that. It's almost like it's nothing, but we know how important that is. But besides that, the talk by Bishop Means this evening, talking about the history, taking us back to the very start. I think it was so poignant. I don't know what people felt, but it was so good to get that reflection. And I'm starting there because it's a mouthful, right? Bounded ethicality, understanding and addressing the knowing, doing gap in Christian morals and ethics. It's a mouthful. What does that mean? And I shared to the people on the table with me up here that this actually came out from a conversation I had with Bishop Orji and the wife, Madame Lillian, in Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada, when they were there. I think it was in February. We were reflecting on everything going on with Church of Nigeria, with ACNA, story that I don't have to belabor here this evening. So we were asking ourselves, why do people do what they do, knowing what they know? Why is there often so much discrepancy between the faith we profess, what we know, and what we do in our real life experiences? And it's all of us. Perhaps the so-called fallibility of man. You know, it may well be inherent in us, but maybe a little bit of self-awareness, a little bit of introspection, a little bit of education could help us to get an exposition to what is really going on, so we can do the much we can, and of course leave the rest to God. So Your Lordship, Bishop Orji, President of the Synod, and your wife, Madame Lillian, I haven't seen her, I don't know, maybe she's
my daughter came in.
Okay. Distinguished members of the clergy, my lords, temporal and spiritual, ladies and gentlemen, it's a deep honor to stand before you today as we explore this profound intersection of ancient wisdom, contemporary ethics, and Christian discipleship. So in our discourse today, we're going to be looking at the limitations of our ethics as humans. We'll look at our collective propensity for moral compromise. And we'll look at the guidance that the Bible may have to offer us in these matters. We will also be looking at the practical application of our Christian faith in addressing real-world matters. I want to start with this little disclaimer. I am only a devoted Christian. I happen to be a professor of psychiatry and perhaps a scholar of psychology. I have no formal training or education in Christian ethics, Bible studies, or theology. I've taken as much steps as I can to make sure that what I'm presenting here today is as authentic as I can make it. So any incidental errors or omissions are highly regretted. So, beginning with the end in mind, what are we trying to achieve here today? It is my hope that at the end of this presentation, we will all be able to understand the nature and scope of human morals and ethics. The "and" is highlighted, as you can see, and I'll explain why down the line. So we need to understand the nature and the scope. So there is a scope of our ethics, and that's the whole idea of the bounded ethicality. I also hope that we can appreciate the inherent fallibility of man. What I talked about, the knowing doing gap, we know stuff and we do stuff, and oftentimes you can't reconcile this person you know with what they're doing based on what you know they know. We hope we can apply these principles in our Christian lives and ministry. In other words, what does the Bible really tell us? And then we hope to develop, and because we're all ministers, we're all evangelists, we want to be able to teach strategies to bridge this gap. And that is the integration of our faith and our action. But again, looking at some of the keywords that would come through during this presentation, the word ethics, what does that mean? People say the principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity, or the branch of knowledge that deals with moral principles. So, I think the key thing there, as I underline down the line, is especially in respect to a particular class or group or culture. So, that's why you have medical ethics, you have judicial ethics, you have Christian ethics, and so on. Then we have morals, a person's standards of behavior or beliefs concerning what is and what is not acceptable for them to do. In other words, it is the summation of a person's beliefs about what is right or wrong. So, I wonder if it's too early to start asking questions. I like interactive presentations. So from the slide, and from what we know before now, is there any difference between morals and ethics? Any person? No? Yeah. So.
It seems like by this definition, morals might be a little bit more individual, whereas ethics might be a little bit more general.
Excellent. Brilliant. Actually true. So, morals involves personal code of conduct. So you're right. So a person can follow their own moral code without necessarily adhering to a more society-based ethical standards. So a person or action could be moral but not ethical, and it's actually not uncommon that people's individual morals may be completely at odds with societal ethics. Okay, I better just stay away. So, can anyone share with us an example of when they have experienced or witnessed a morally prudent act that is completely at odds with prevailing ethics? I'm sure we all have examples of that. Do we? Exactly. Something is moral, we do something we think is moral, but not ethical, or you've seen something like that. No? Okay, we'll continue. So, this slide looks at how the Bible helps us to make sense of the concept of ethics. So Christian ethics are based on the teachings and principles of the Bible. In other words, it's the compass. Reverend Stone Street, I don't know if it's his name, he told us in one of the synods, I think it was the one in Toronto, about the compass. That's one thing I took away from that synod. The Bible, the Christ is, north. If you get lost, look north, and then you can make your way, right? So that's the compass for us. And some people say that it's encompassed in the Ten Commandments, as we know it, as kind of taken to be central to our Christian ethical reflection, as it outlines the depth and breadth of our obligations, not just to God, but to one another. So it's important then that we always know to turn to the Bible for guidance on how to live a morally upright and compassionate life according to our faith. So I talked earlier on about, say, judicial ethics, Christian ethics and all that. So just as an example, you see those Bible texts, ethical imperatives to judges. So for example, Deuteronomy 16:19, it says, do not pervert justice or show partiality. Do not accept a bribe for, blah, blah, blah. Leviticus 24:22, you are to have the same love for the foreigner and the native born and the Lord your God. So we see that the Bible actually, and if we go to medicine, if we go to other professions, you see that the Bible actually covers these things. So, Christian ethics as depicted in the Bible. So we've talked about ethics for the judges, but as Christian ethics. So some examples, not exhaustive by any stretch of the imagination. So the golden rule. So in everything, Matthew 7:12, in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. And this sums up the law and the prophets. right? So love for others, 1 Corinthians 13, 17. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy. We know that verse. Caring for the needy, Matthew 25, 35 to 36. For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. We all know that verse. So these are all examples of what ethical standards the Bible has set for us. So you also have the more important matters of the law, Matthew 23, 23. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. So you give a tenth of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. So this, I said earlier on, I'm not a theologian, but some theologians would wonder, yes, the Ten Commandments might be a summary of the law, but is it? Because remember the story of when the Pharisee man asked Jesus Christ, what is the most important commandment? And then he summarized it. Love God, love your fellow man, and upon these hang the laws and the prophets. So, but that's a matter for academic discourse. So, we now look at the concept of ethical intelligence. What does it mean to be ethically intelligent or ethical intelligence? It is essentially the capacity that we have as humans to make ethical decisions, to understand right from wrong, and behave in morally responsible ways. It describes a person's ability to reason through ethical dilemmas and make the right choice. Put simply, ethical intelligence is the personal code that dictates one's ability to make ethical decisions when faced with moral challenges. And then we have Bruce Weinstein, who in 2021 proposed the 5 principles: do no harm, make things better, respect others, be fair, and care. So these are what Weinstein identified as the principles, general 5 principles of human ethics. So in summary, is it the right thing to do? So when you look at the 10 Commandments, some theologians will say the first part of it is for God, the first part of it is for us as humans. So the later part of the 10 Commandments is all about that. And then, I'm not a member of the Rotary Club, but I'm a fan of Rotary Club because of the 4-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? So I think those are quite pointed in explaining to us what we should consider in the realm of our ethical decision making. So according to social psychology though, and behavioral ethics, it takes our ethical intelligence to become numb, to be numbed. And the more it is numbed, the more we are exposed to this whole concept of bounded ethicality. So we transit now to the whole idea of bounded ethicality, the limited scope of our human morals and ethics. So as we probably know, human decision making is rarely, in fact, almost never a linear construct. It's almost way more complex than that. It is usually complicated by unending complex challenges of everyday lives. But as Christians, our faith is founded on a strong ethical framework that emphasizes love, compassion, and justice. But then, in spite of this, we still see this discrepancy between what we know is morally right and what we do in real life settings. And this is what the concept of ethical, bounded ethicality is. Why do we know the things we know and do the things we do sometimes? So by exploring this concept and its implications for Christian individuals and communities, the hope tonight is that we can better understand the reasons behind this gap and develop strategies to address it in our individual and collective lives. So I'm going to play a little video. I hope this plays. Okay, it's taking me to a YouTube page, and I hope the internet is good. Oh, it's not connecting here.
open, but it's showing you the slideshow. Yeah, it shows. Now you can go back to YouTube videos. No, it's gonna so far it's too far. There you go.
My apologies, please.
Economists have often modeled human decision makers as completely rational. According to this model, rational people know their own preferences, gather and accurately process all relevant information, and then make rational choices that advance their own interests. However, Herbert Simon won a Nobel Prize in economics by pointing out that people are rational, but only boundedly so, in that they seldom gather all available information. They often do not accurately process the information that they do gather, nor do they necessarily know what it is that will make them happy. People are rational, but boundedly so.
With rationality, I think it's much easier with economic decisions. I mean, there's a number, and I mean, we're business students. I think we like numbers. Ethical issues, I mean, there's so much in between. It's like the decisions can't be made the same way. It's just, there isn't the basis to do that.
If the last 50 years of psychological research has proven anything, it is that the situational often dominates the dispositional. That is to say, our disposition or desire to be good people can be overwhelmed by psychological or organizational factors that we may not even be aware of. These factors adversely affect ethical decision-making as well as economic decision-making, meaning that people are boundedly ethical as well as boundedly rational.
I grew up Catholic, and I since have not really felt that connected to the Catholic organization, or the church. I still feel obligated to go to please family voters.
The basic notion, as spelled out by Professor Ann Tenbrunsel and her colleagues, is that systematic and predictable organizational pressures and psychological processes cause people to engage in ethically questionable behaviors that are inconsistent with their own preferences. Various factors cause us to make unethical decisions that we later regret.
If you've ever been around high school mean girls, you know that there are certain times that you will have your own ethics and morals kind of pushed a little bit for the sake of joining a group.
For example, although most of us want to act ethically, we also wish to please authority figures. Therefore, if our boss asks us to do something unethical, we may do it without even realizing our mistake, because we're focusing on pleasing the boss rather than on the ethical dimensions of the issue facing us. To take another example, we also have a natural desire to be part of the team at work. Therefore, if a questionable action advances the team's interests as we perceive them, we may act unethically because, again, we're focusing on achieving the team's goals rather than on adhering to our own ethical standards.
Our coach will be like, if you really need to, try to trip her, try to kind of hurt her more than she needs to be. And then in a moment, our team's like, we're aggressive, we got this. But then later on, if you really think about it, there's no need to be more aggressive in a soccer game.
Hey you, stop!
Most of us want to act ethically and are certain that we will because we just know we're good people. But most of us are also overconfident regarding our own ethicality. This can lead to complacency that causes us to make decisions containing ethical dimensions without reflecting legally. So we're ethical, it's true, but boundedly so. I recommend a little humility.
Come on!
Only if we truly commit ourselves to being ethical people and diligently guard against the organizational pressures and psychological factors that put bounds upon our ability to be so, can we possibly realize our ethical potential.
I think humans are very irrational people.
I think situational factors do influence the decisions you make, whether it's ethical or not. To overcome them, you have to actually see that you're doing something wrong. You can't overcome something if you don't think you're not doing anything wrong.
We construct taboos and societal sort of norms, and then we push back against those.
I think if we just think about, what is really important, like family, friends, and then just do the best that you can without doing anything unethical, like hurting someone in a soccer game or cheating on a test just so that you can do well, then that's going to lead you, to be more happy than you were if you did do something unethical.
Okay, I'm sure we can all relate to a thing or two from that video clip. So I have to now navigate back to my slides. Okay, there we go. So, showing? Good. So, slideshow. Set to view. Okay, so bounded ethicality, I almost feel I don't need to continue. I think we all know what it is now. The psychological phenomenon wherein individuals unintentionally or unknowingly allow situational factors to influence their ethical decisions and behavior, even among individuals who possess very strong moral compasses. Human beings, despite their best intentions, often fall prey to cognitive biases and external pressures that impede their capacity to make consistently ethical choices. Ethical choices are not solely determined by an individual's personal values, but also influenced by external factors. And this can lead to weakened moral fabric within the Christian community. So what are some examples of this? You see a feminist who, by definition, espouses equality, diversity, and justice, but then could at the same time be racist. So you say Black Lives Matter, no, all lives matter, no, why should you segregate, no, but then, so sometimes we hold these two dimensions even without knowing that we do. So this explains how social and organizational pressures and our own psychological processes cause us to engage in these questionable inconsistencies. So what are some of the root causes of bounded ethicality? People have made reference to the fall of man, Genesis 1-3, as being symbolic of human disobedience, the introduction of moral awareness, and inherent flaws of our collective human nature. So, at the Garden of Eden, even when everything was ideal, humans still made very questionable ethical choices. So in the next few slides, we're going to delve deeper into some of these root causes that we need to be mindful of. So the first one is linear thinking. So remember where we started? Human decision making is almost rarely a linear construct. If this, then this. No. There are so many other things that you have to keep in mind if you are to make decisions at any level. Right? So we're talking today about ethnic and cultural sensitivity in Christian life or in medical practice as a physician. You always have to weigh different factors. So if my mother-in-law, if I have a dog and I've said don't feed this dog in the afternoon, and I come back and my mother-in-law gave the dog some food, in responding to that, I'm going to be weighing how important is this relationship to me? How will my wife feel? What she has done, how big or bad is it? Right? It's different if, that was something more advanced that she did, if I will, to determine how I respond to that. So linear thinking It's vision that disregards complexity and results in, but it basically oversimplifies complex ethical issues and can lead to both individuals and organizations making decisions without realizing it. So you have oversimplification, or what I sometimes call lack of sophisticated thinking. Let's think about the CON thing and Church of Nigeria and ACNA. Some of our Nigerian colleagues will say, oh, we are Nigerians, we have to, but if you ask him, what is GAFCON? I asked somebody who is going around as a chancellor in somewhere, and what is GAFCON? And he doesn't know what GAFCON is. So not even sophisticated enough to understand the context in which he is making very, very strong decisions, especially when it involves influencing others. So incomplete information, here and now priority, ethical myopia, focusing on here and now rather than looking at the bigger picture. That is the whole thing about linear thinking. We have compartmentalization, which occurs when people separate their moral values or principles from decisions they make in specific contexts, especially when there is a conflict between what is ethically right and what is strategically advantageous to them. So moral versus strategic concerns, so we compartmentalize. You make this decision here, you go this other way because it's consistent with the ethics and morals and expectations in this domain, and you come to this other side and you make totally different decisions. So there is also the concept of cognitive dissonance, which is a mental conflict that occurs when your beliefs don't line up with your actions. It's a very uncomfortable state of mind when you have contradictory values or attitudes or perspectives about the same thing. So typically when people have this concept of cognitive dissonance, to break it up, you have to convince yourself that your actions are acceptable in a given context. In other words, you rationalize these actions. You try to make them make sense to you. So we are going to now look at another video. I'm going to have to end this show. Now I've learned to do it. I thought I learned to do it. I should actually have clicked.
Cut and paste that address into your browser.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Copy and then
high speed internet.
It's coming up.
Cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is the mental stress people feel when they hold two contradictory ideas in their mind at the same time. When the ideas have ethical dimensions, this discomfort is called moral dissonance. Most people think of themselves as ethical, but studies show that most people also frequently lie and cheat in ways they would not want others to know about or see. This conflict between their moral self-image and their immoral actions creates cognitive dissonance, and most people, consciously or unconsciously, want to resolve this psychological discomfort. Ideally, people will settle this conflict by stopping their unethical actions and living up to their own good self-image. But, more often, people resolve the dissonance by finding ways to think of themselves as good people while continuing to do bad things. For example, take Toshihide Iguchi, a trader who lost $1.1 billion for his employer Daiwa Bank and covered it up. Although he admitted to doing things that constituted a crime, he didn't think of himself as a criminal. Because his goal had been to save Daiwa Bank from financial stress, he saw his cheating as altruistic. Unfortunately, as Iguchi's story and many others illustrate, we have an extraordinary ability to mentally distance ourselves from our own wrongdoing. So, when we feel cognitive dissonance, we should stop and reflect carefully upon the choice we are about to make.
So, cognitive dissonance. And again, I'm sure we can all relate to that concept. So, the third concept, the third cause of bounded ethicality is groupthink and superiority complex. So what is groupthink? It occurs when a group of people prioritize consensus and harmony.
Confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency of people's minds to seek out information that supports the views they already hold.
Sorry about that.
It also leads people to interpret evidence in ways.
Sorry about that. Okay, so groupthink. People prioritize consensus and harmony within the group over critical thinking and ethical considerations. So you have groupthink, you have superiority complex. And both contribute to bounded ethicality by limiting individuals' ability to engage in critical ethical reasoning, consider alternative perspectives, and empathize with the ethical concerns of others. So overcoming bounded ethicality in this situation requires promoting open dialogue, encouraging dissenting voices, and fostering humility and self-awareness in ethical decision-making. So there is a difference between consensus and unanimity. We had both here today. Consensus, when one of my brothers, the venerable, okay, when we passed the Constitution, it was by consensus. Because some agreed, some did not agree, but the majority carried the vote. But when we elected members of the board, it was by unanimity, because everybody agreed, at least nobody. So what we see here reflected in the life of our diocese is that we are devoid of groupthink and superiority complex, because Bishop Orji could have shut it down and we just, in fact, that gentleman had discussed this with Bishop Orji, apparently knew Bishop Orji's preferred position, and still felt comfortable to speak up and speak out and explain his position. And even after Bishop Orji came out and explained his own perspective and encouraged us to vote, he knew some people may vote yes, some people may vote no, but let's go. And some people voted no, and majority carried the vote. But there are settings where such dissent is not allowed. That man from saying that yesterday and wouldn't even have come here today, because he would know never to bring it up, because it would be shut down by the bishop. So I am proud.
I took a picture with him after.
Yes, in fact, I was going to say, right after the session, because you and I were going for lunch, and you were taking pictures with him, and I was like, there you go. I was thinking about this talk today once that happened. I was like, wow. So we're actually blessed to be in an organization where we are not forced to accept whatever is put in front of us. People can think freely for themselves and express themselves, and that is great. So in superiority complex, people have this exaggerated sense of their own abilities and knowledge and moral superiority. And this kind of people overestimate their ethical judgment and believe that they are above making unethical decisions. And there is this overconfidence that leads to a failure to critically assess their own actions or decisions or ethical concerns. So some individuals with this superiority complex may even adopt what we call the moral relativist perspective, where they believe that their own actions are inherently more ethical than others, and this can lead to biased and self-serving approach in decision making. So group members in this kind of settings will feel pressure to conform to the majority opinion or the dominant ethical viewpoint within the group, even if they have reservations or ethical concerns. So this conformity is what leads to unethical decisions, being carried out. So groupthink also involves suppression of dissenting voices. We've talked about that, and minority opinions. So there is a lack of empathy because you don't care about what people feel for you to operate in that way. And brethren, I think we are blessed to operate in an environment that is free from such emotional blackmail and harassment. Okay, I hope this is the last video, the way things are going, but let's see.
Groupthink. Groupthink occurs when people's desire to maintain group loyalty becomes more important than making the best choices. People often find it hard to think and act independently in group situations. According to psychologist Irving Janis, groupthink is a deterioration of mental efficiency, reality testing, and moral judgment that results from in-group pressures. Group members often suffer overconfidence and hold an unquestioned belief in the group's competence and morality. Dissent by group members may be discouraged and even lead to expulsion from the group. Because people often want to avoid these punishments, they remain silent. This creates the illusion of agreement or unanimity in the group. Groups may also reach decisions, including moral judgments, which are more extreme than any single member of the group originally supported. Unfortunately, if groupthink takes hold, group members may not even question ethically dubious decisions and actions. For example, some people say that the Bush administration's decision to invade Iraq because of non-existent weapons of mass destruction was due to groupthink. Indeed, groupthink can cause us to value harmony and consensus over independent judgment, and can lead to unethical behavior.
Okay, nice and quick. It's good. Okay, so we've looked at groupthink, and I think we can all agree that it's the bane of our society today at different levels. So the question then is, as leaders, all of us here are leaders in our own denominations, in our families, what kind of culture are we creating and are we nurturing in our various communities, in our churches, in our local parishes, in our families, in our communities? As a leader, what kind of leader are you? Are you open to dissent? Are you open to people having their own ethical reflection and contributing that to the discourse? So that is something for all of us to reflect on. Moral amnesia. This is why, as I said earlier on, the talk by Bishop Means today was, I hope that was recorded, that should be played on YouTube, that should be played on every available social media. It's important for us to get the historical context of anything we say and do. For me, that was a masterclass. I think it should be professionally recorded for the times. And I like how he started with Ajayi Crowder to tell us, speak to us as a people. This is where moral amnesia comes in. Forgetting, neglecting, or ignoring historical events and future consequences when making ethical decisions. So it happens in the form of norm shifting, when we know what societal norms and ethical standards evolve over time, but then people forget or ignore historical ethical norms. What happens then is that they inadvertently shift their ethical boundaries based on the prevailing norms of the moment. So anywhere the wind blows, you just go, right? This can lead to justification of behavior that would have been considered unethical in the past, but now accepted due to moral amnesia. So, Primate Oko, for example, abolished dual citizenship in 2019. And we all know how that contributed to where we are today. If he considered the historical context as we learned today, I don't think such actions would have happened. So ethical fading occurs when the ethical aspects of a decision become less salient or clear due to cognitive biases, distractions, or other factors. Individuals then begin to overlook or downplay the ethical dimensions of their decision and focus instead on immediate concerns and benefits. Something, what is in it for me? So you see that instant versus delayed gratification. What is in it for me now is what is influencing your decision, as opposed to considering all the historical context. So you have anchoring, you have framing. So basically, in temporal discounting, individuals place greater emphasis on immediate benefits or consequences while discounting long-term effects on their actions. So what is in it for me and what is in it for me now? And again, you see that concept of short-term versus long-term goal trade-off. So to mitigate these effects of moral amnesia, both at individual and organizational levels, we need to implement strategies such as regular ethical training. We need to foster a culture of ethical awareness and encourage the consideration of historical contexts as we did today. Also consider future consequences when we are making ethical decisions, especially as an organization. The fifth one is what we call here ethical externalities. So in behavioral ethics, this is the impact of external factors on ethical behavior. Something as peer pressure, social conformity, time pressure, and burnout. So as a medical doctor, there's lots of studies that show that if you present as a patient at 5 a.m. in the morning at the emergency department, the decision-making capacity of the doctor seeing you there is not as sharp as if you presented at 7 p.m. earlier that evening, because he's stressed and burnt out. So people cut and join, shortcuts, right? So simple things like what's going on in your physical environment, financial inducements, cannot affect our ethical decision making. So encouraging awareness, creating environments that support ethical decision making can mitigate some of these factors. So we look at implications for our Christian life and ministry. How could we now, as a Christian body, make sure that we are integrating our faith and our actions, what we know and what we do, to reduce that gap? Of course, we are fallible as humans. We may never be able to attain that perfection, but we need to be mindful of it and endeavor in our everyday lives to continually bridge that gap. So as we have discussed above, the concept of ethical externality, bounded ethicality, is the inherent limitation we have in our ability to make ethically sound decisions consistently. We do make them, but not consistently. So even well-intentioned, committed, and practicing Christians can be led astray by the cognitive biases, situational factors, and complexities in modern day life, even though we are called to live higher moral standard that is rooted in love and compassion and righteousness. But then, aren't we lucky that the Bible actually does offer us invaluable insights, not only into our limitations as humans, but also, most importantly, the propensity for moral compromise and the paths towards ethical transcendence. So we know the Bible reminds us that ethical behavior extends beyond individual actions and encompasses our interactions with others and our connection to a higher moral order. The Bible also inspires us to transcend these bounds of self-interest and situational pressures and aim for a more profound and enduring ethical commitment. The Bible invites us then to reflect on our inherent human vulnerabilities and the circumstances that can compromise our ethical decision making. And here the Bible also serves as both a mirror reflecting our fallibility and, most importantly, a beacon guiding us towards higher ethical paths. It's not merely a collection of cautionary tales. It also offers us a roadmap for navigating the boundaries of ethicality. So the book of Proverbs, for example, we find guidance on cultivating wisdom and discernment, which are essential tools in recognizing and overcoming the constraints of bounded ethicality. So Proverbs 4:23, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. And as we see this admonition, it emphasizes the importance of self-awareness and mindfulness in ethical decision making. So we also see Mark 12:20-31, regarding justice, love, kindness, and humility with God. So, okay. So in the next few slides, and we're rounding up now, very soon, we're going to look at what the Bible actually says about some of these root causes. We're going to delve deeper now. So we talk about the concept of cognitive biases. So these cloud our judgment, lead us astray from our moral principles. We look at the story of King David and Bathsheba, for example. You look at 2 Samuel 11, where King David's affair with Bathsheba ultimately leads to murder of the husband Uriah. And we can see that rationalization we talked about, trying to make it make sense to you because you've already made a mistake. And motivated reasoning. You are reasoning because of a particular motivation that is very self-serving, typically. So despite David being a man after God's own heart, he fell victim to the boundaries of his own ethical judgment, and this had disastrous consequences for him. Okay, I think I want to promise you this will be the last video. Last. And this is ethically true, I can tell you.
Cognitive bias. People generally But even the smartest and best educated people often commit cognitive errors as they make financial, medical, personal, and ethical decisions. These errors in thinking, also called cognitive bias, affect all people in virtually every situation. For example, physicians must be aware of the error of overconfidence bias as they make diagnoses which could cause them to insufficiently value other doctors' opinions. Likewise, physicians, and everyone else, must watch out for confirmation bias, which is the tendency people have to process new information in a way that is heavily influenced by their existing beliefs. The anchoring effect is another bias in thinking, whereby people's initial focus on a particular factor number means that they fail to properly adjust their judgments as new and different information arises. There is also the cognitive error of overgeneralization, which is the tendency to jump to a broad conclusion based on a single piece of evidence. People are influenced in differing degrees by these and many other cognitive biases. Studies show that some errors in thinking can be moderated with education. For example, physicians can learn to recognize cognitive biases and so reduce their diagnostic mistakes. But even with effort, none of us will escape cognitive errors altogether. Knowing your brain is biased is critical to making it work better for you and everyone around you.
So again, this is one of those ones that we cannot relate to. So people, you can nearly divide everybody in the US into do you watch Fox News or do you watch CNN, or maybe MSNBC, something in between. So you watch what confirms what you know, what you believe, what you want to believe. So I've talked about archiving Bishop Means' presentation, but if you played it to some people, these white people, they won't even go 30 seconds into it. No, because it's not speaking to what they want to believe. what makes their life easier to contemplate in their head, right? So that is that confirmation bias, then an anchoring. People hold a belief and you don't want to change it at all. So we are, as we saw, we are all subject to this. We just need to be aware of them and continue to adjust as we go towards perfection. So the Bible also provides examples of individuals succumbing to social pressure, as we've seen in Exodus, the golden calf story, illustrating that. I think we all know that story. So again, social pressure and peer pressure, as we've talked about before. Situational factors and ethical dilemmas, again, we've talked about these. You can see the parable of Good Samaritan. Ethical dilemmas and situational factors. So that's actually a very, very, very poignant story, you know, where people want to keep the law. And remember, morals and law doesn't mean ethics. You can keep the law all you like. The Pharisees, man came, say he knows all the 10 commandments, and, you know, and Christ said, okay, go give everything you have to the poor. And he was challenged. You're keeping all the law, but the summary of all law is love God and love your neighbor, right? So law, morals, not always the same as ethics. So we see in the story of the Good Samaritan how the people that should know, the custodians of the law and the prophets, because the law in Jewish, going back in Jewish the standards, is the Bible pretty much. But even the custodians of the law and the prophets failed ethically and horribly in that setting. So repentance and redemption is another one, where we see how the story of the prodigal son, what it illustrates there. We see that actually in the story of, so the younger son, so we know the story of the Good Samaritan. And the good thing about that is the Bible is also saying to us that there is hope in redemption through Christ. In spite of our bounded ethicality, there is actually hope in redemption. If we are aware, if we make strides to correct ourselves and hope in God and pray, there is actually hope in redemption. That's what that story tells us. So, summarizing human nature, it is human nature to make errors in judgment and to be swayed by internal and external influences. As followers of Christ, we are called to rise above these limitations, to be a beacon of light in a world that sometimes values self-interest over love for one another. By embracing Christian ethics, we strive to live a life that is not confined by our own human limitations, but is instead guided by the timeless principles of love and compassion and righteousness. And these stories that we've gone through within the Bible do remind us that ethical boundaries are not fixed. Thankfully, they're not fixed. As humans, we are capable of both ethical lapses and moral growth. So the Bible then encourages us to be mindful of our ethical limitations, while also embracing the possibility of transformation in our journey towards moral integrity and redemption through Christ. So I am hoping, as we started with the end in mind, that we have a better understanding about the difference between moral and ethics and the scope of our moral and ethics as humans. That we now understand that there is a gap in what we know and what we do in most of our everyday lives. I hope that we can reflect from here on what the Bible says and what this implies to us in our individual lives and ministry, and that we can begin to develop our own strategies on how to bridge this gap. In other words, how to begin to integrate our faith and our action. So thank you for the privilege of your time and attention.